Good evening, everyone. Today we will study the chapter metals and non-metals. So welcome everyone to the live session. Please do hurry and join the live session and we will start our live session. Okay? तो आज हम क्या करेंगे metals और non-metals. Astha Diwari, good evening. So today we will study the metals and non-metals. So at first we have to know which is metal and which is non-metal. So at first we have to know the physical properties that differentiate metals and the non-metals. So let's start our lesson. Okay. So at first the physical properties. So metals and non-metals are differentiated by their properties. Some of physical properties are some of them is chemical properties. So at the very first we have to study the physical properties of the metals and non-metals. And we know the difference also. Okay? So the first physical properties. The first is state. Metals are typically solids at room temperature. Why this mentioned? Why should we mention at room temperature? Because at the higher temperature, the states of the metals or non-metals can change. So when it's above the water and the ice, at 0 degrees Celsius, the state of water is in the solid form, that is ice. But in the room temperature or above the temperature 0 degrees Celsius, the state changes to the liquid form. So we have the water then. Okay. So we should mention at room temperature. This is a key word. Okay. So metals are typically solids at room temperature. Okay. Can anyone state the names of metals in the comment section? Anyone from the comment section? Who will give the answer? Name some metals. Anyone? तो मेटल का एग्जाम्पल कौन कौन सा है, किसको हम मेटल बोलते हैं और किसको नॉन मेटल्स। तो देखो, मेटल्स आर टिपिकली सॉलिड, सो जस्ट लाइक आयरन, जिंक, एल्यूमिनियम, these are the examples of metals, and this is typically solids at room temperature. But non-metals can be solids or liquids or in gaseous state. So when we take the examples of carbon, sulfur, phosphorus, these are in the solid forms. But when we state the example as bromine, bromine is liquid. Or gases like oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, these are the non-metals in the gaseous state. At the room temperature, there is 3 states present in non-metals. Okay, so these are the examples of the non-metals. Okay, got it? So now we have to study the second physical properties, that is ductility. Which is ductile or which is non-ductile? We have to differentiate it first. So, what is ductility? The physical property ductility. The ability of metals to be drawn into thin wires. So, we see the wires of copper. Okay. In our household wiring, we always see the copper. So this is the ductile metal, or this is ductile, so this is metal. So the ability of metals to be drawn into thin wires are called ductility. So there is an example also. A single gram of gold can be stretched into a wire about 2 kilometers long, but non-metals are brittle. This is non-ductile. Non-metals are non-ductile. ठीक है, अगर आप चारकोल को देखेंगे तो चारकोल को क्या हम खींच सकते हैं और वायर की शेप दे सकते हैं? नहीं, क्योंकि उसे जब हम खींचेंगे तो वो क्या हो जाएगा? बिकॉज ऑफ दिस इज ब्रिटल, वो टूट जाएगा. So ductility is the physical property of metal, and the non-metals are non-ductile. Okay, got it? Anyone have any doubt here? This is the ductile property of metal, and there is also exceptions. So we have to study the exceptions also, but in later. Okay. So now we have to study the third property of metal and non-metal. So hardness. Hardness, most metals are hard, though the degree varies. The degree of hardness is varying because we know that as iron is hard. Okay, and gold is also hard. But their degrees of hardness is vary. Why? Gold is not as hard as iron. We know that. Okay. So hardness, most metals are hard, though the degree varies. But when we see the non-metals or take examples of non-metals, they are generally soft and have low tensile strength. So there is the term tensile. Do you know what is tensile means? Anyone from the comment section? Does anyone know what is tensile means? The meaning of tensile? Anyone? Okay, so I have to tell you. Tensile refers to material's ability to be stretched or pulled. Okay? To be stretched or to be pulled. So, which have high tensile strength that can be stretched but which have the low tensile strength that does not stretch. Okay, so the hardness of the material, okay, the tensile strength is going to this section, that ductility. Okay, so there is high tensile strength, so which have high tensile strength that also have the ductility, or the ductility, the property shows because of the tensile strength. This is the chemistry behind the ductility. Okay, this is the real chemistry behind ductility. Okay, got it? So non-metals have the lower tensile strength, as we got the sulfur. ओके, सल्फर को कभी भी तार जैसे नहीं खींचा जा सकता है. सल्फर क्या हो जाएगा, इसको हम जब देखेंगे तो ये क्या हो जाएगा, इसको अगर हम स्ट्रेच करें तो ये क्या हो जाएगा, टूट जाएगा. सो सल्फर इज नॉन डक्टाइल और लोअर टेंसाइल स्ट्रेंथ. ओके, दैट हैव लोअर टेंसाइल स्ट्रेंथ. ओके, गॉट इट? So now the next property, hardness, we got it. Okay, now luster. In their pure state, okay, this is also a keyword, that in their pure state. In the pure state, metals have a shining surface. This is known as metallic luster or metal shines. So we got the ornaments made from the metals because these has the shines. The shining metal, we used as ornaments the shining metals. But non-metals generally have a dull appearance and do not reflect light. There is also have an exception case that we will study later. Okay, non-metals generally have a dull appearance and do not reflect light. ओके, तो हम अगर एग्जांपल पकड़े चारकोल को, दैट इज कार्बन. सो कार्बन हैज अ डल अपीयरेंस. ओके, एलोट्रोप ऑफ कार्बन इज ग्राफाइट. ओके, this has dull appearance, but when we got the allotrope diamond, this has shine. So this was the exception case. Okay, so this is the difference between metal and non-metals, and the properties also we are studying. Okay, so let's study the next point, malleability. तो malleability क्या है, हमें अब malleability के बारे में जानना है. तो देखो, this is the property. So this is the definition, the property by which metals can be beaten into thin sheets. So this is the malleability. Metal shows the malleability, but non-metal doesn't. We know that. Okay, this is the property by which metals can be beaten into thin sheets. Okay, हम gold का sheet तो देखे ही होंगे, ठीक है? तो this is the property by which metals can be beaten into thin sheets. So this is the example of metal, malleable metal, that is gold, silver, aluminium, iron. Okay, this is the examples. But they cannot be beaten non-metals when we take the example of a non-metal just like carbon, sulfur, okay, phosphorus, that cannot be beaten into sheets or drawn into wires. They break into pieces when hammered. So, this is also the reason of low tensile strength. The reason behind the malleability is also the low tensile strength. So, metal has higher tensile strength. So, this is can be beaten by hammered and we make sheets from the metal. But for the non-metals, if we beaten it with the hammers or drawn into wires, we doesn't make the sheets from it because it is breakable or fragile. Okay, now we have to read the fifth property or the sixth property. Okay, sonority. So this is the sixth property, that is sonority. Metals produced a ringing sound when struck against a hard object. This is why they are used to make bells and guitar strings. Okay, we know about bell. So in the school, okay, so metals produce a ringing sound when struck against a hard object. This is why they are used to make bells and guitar strings. But we know that there is not occurred any sonority for the non-metals. So this is the difference. Also, so we got 6 differences of metals and non-metals. Okay. Do you have any doubt about it? So do comment. Okay, now the seventh physical property, conductivity. There is 2 types of conductivity. One is heat conduction and other is electricity conduction. Okay, तो ना तो देखो, silver and copper are the best conductors. Lead and mercury are comparatively poor conductors, and this is also an exception. Okay, we know that lead and mercury are also metals, but they comparatively poorly conductors. Okay, they are not good conductors of heat. We know that mercury is a conductor of electricity, but this is poor conductor of heat. So, and mercury is the metal, liquid metal. This is not solid metal. Mercury is liquid at the room temperature. Okay, so the liquid metal that conduct electricity but doesn't conduct heat, the example is mercury. Okay, this is the answer of the question. Okay. Now, the non-metals are not a good conductor. Non-metals are always poor conductors. Non-metals are poor conductors of heat and electricity. But there is also an exception, and that is We know what is the exception here? Anyone from the comment section? What is the exception? That non-metals also conducting heat or electricity. Anyone from the comment section? Which non-metal conduct electricity? Okay, anyone from the comment section? Can anyone answer it? So let's hurry and do comment. तो किसको पता है? Anyone? Okay, so I have to tell you that the answer is graphite. The answer is graphite. Okay. Graphite is a non-metal, but it conducts electricity. Okay. So now we have to study the melting and boiling point property of the metals and non-metals. So, melting and boiling points. Generally, metals have higher melting points. Okay. Melting and boiling points, generally metals have higher melting points, but non-metals have lower, much lower boiling and melting points than the metals. Okay, so non-metals have much lower boiling and melting points than the metals. Okay. So we got 8 differences between metals and non-metals as well as the properties. Okay. But these physical properties have exceptions. Okay. So we have to study the exceptions also. Okay. So the exceptions. All metals except mercury exist as solids at room temperature. Okay, mercury exists as solid at room temperature. Okay, so iron, solid, aluminium, solid. So there is another question that asked, that is, all metals except mercury. Which metal Okay, so the answer is mercury. Okay, so the answer is mercury, and mercury is good conductor of electricity, but poor conductor of okay. And the mercury is also known as liquid silver. So the mercury is also known as liquid silver. Do you know the Latin name of mercury? Anyone from the comment section? Can anyone give the answer? The Latin name of mercury? This is hydrogen. Okay, Hg. This is the Latin name of mercury, hydrogen. Okay. Now, the second exception. Metals have high melting points, but gallium and cesium have very low melting points. These two metals will melt if you keep them on your palm. So, this is also the exception. Okay. So, the physical properties are not used to differentiate metals and non-metals because of those exceptions. Okay. So now the third exception, iodine is a non-metal but it is lustrous. Okay. So this shines. So iodine shines at natural state. Okay, this is also an exception of non-metals. So now the next point. Carbon is a non-metal that can exist in different forms. Each form is called an allotrope. We know allotrope of carbon is the diamond and graphite used in pencils. Okay? Diamond used as gem or in the ornament. Okay? So, graphite, each forms is called an allotrope. So this is the definition of allotrope. Okay, diamond and allotrope of carbon is the hardest natural substance known and has a very high melting and boiling point. Here we get two exceptions. One is hardness. Non-metals so non-metals are not as hard as metals, but the hardest is the diamond, which is an allotrope of a non-metal, that is carbon. Okay, so carbon is a non-metal that can exist in different forms. Each form is called an allotrope. So this is the definition of allotrope. And diamond and allotrope of carbon is the hardest natural substance. It is the hardest natural substance. So this violates the physical property of non-metals. Okay, this is the violations that we call the exceptions. Okay. And now the melting and boiling points. Higher melting and boiling points. So we know that the metals have higher melting and boiling points, but for non-metals, they have lower boiling and melting point. So the diamond violates again. So diamond has higher melting and boiling point. And now there is the conduction. Okay, the exception is in the conductivity of non-metals. Non-metals are poor conductor. Okay, non-metals are poor conductor. So now graphite has electric conductivity. It can conduct the electricity. Okay. So the another allotrope of carbon violates the physical property of the metals. Okay. Now the last but not the least. Okay. There is another exception. Alkali metals, just like lithium, sodium, potassium, are so soft that they can be cut with a knife. They have low densities and low melting point. So there is 4 exception we got. Okay, that is lithium, hardness, at first hardness. Okay, lithium, sodium and potassium are so soft that they can be cut with a knife. This is a property of non-metal, not for the metals. So this is the violation of the hardness property of the metals, and now they have low densities. We know that metals have higher densities. Okay, and low melting point. So this has low melting points. Okay, low melting points. This is also a violation. So physical property is not the actual property to differentiate the metals and non-metals. So we have to study the chemical reactions or the chemical properties of metals and non-metals to differentiate which is metal or which is non-metal. To know the metals and non-metals property. Okay. So we have to study it in the next live session. Today we will studied the physical properties, and for the next live we have to study the chemical properties. Okay, so that can make the differentiation between the metals and non-metals. So that's it. That's all for today. And again, graphite and bismuth. Graphite, another allotrope of carbon. Unlike other non-metals which are insulators, graphite is a very good conductor of electricity due to its free electrons. Okay, this is an exception again. Okay, we had studied it. So again, bismuth and mercury, metals that are actually poor conductors of heat compared to metals like copper or silver. These also the 2 points of exceptions which violates the law of or the properties of metals and non-metals. So that's all for today. So we have to study the next session and the next properties, that is chemical properties of metals and non-metals. Okay, so that's all for today. And please do subscribe our YouTube channel, Eduins CBSE. Thank you for joining the live session. Okay, we will meet again in the next live session.